Alright, everything going well? Okay, cool. This is going to be the volume that I'm talking at, so keep that in mind. We ready? 3, 2, 1, mark. Okay. Let's go back. One slide. Okay. Hey, how's it going? My name is Spencer, and I'm here to talk about character design. For those of you who don't know me, I am a Californian film student, and I did a lot of research into character design for a project that I was working on. Now, unfortunately, the project was cut fearfully short because of a problem that I had with, well, my bag was stolen while I was in the United Kingdom, and with it I lost all of my notes, and I was forced to stay there for a little while longer than intended, which led to some pretty damaging ramifications in the long run, which eventually led to this project being unfinished. That's fine. It probably wasn't going to be that good in the first place because I'm a teenager. This is really informal, and I'm terribly sorry about that, but that's just the way that the cookie is going to crumble in this videos. So, character design presentation. Character design. Character design. Character design is fun. Demental. That's right. Character design is very important when you are, working on a project. It's incredibly crucial for you to be able to design your characters well from not just, a two-dimensional space, but also, time, space, the way that they look and behave and such. So let's just get through. What is character design? Well, if you understand the basics of the English language, you will be able to break down that phrase into two different words, which it is made out of, character and design. If you understand the English language well, you'll know what character means. In this context, it is a human being that is completely falsified and made up for the purpose of a story. Design is another word that you will be able to understand if you know the English language. In this context, it means designing a fictional human. I should not have to explain this anymore. Character design is very important. Not only does it convey information about the characters in the story, but it also makes a story memorable, and it can show a message or tell a story. The way that it might, it's a very important way to pay attention to the characters, and you'll get a better idea of who they are as people, who they are as human beings, and how they interact with the world around them. Things that they wear, how they'll pose, and how their design will change. It also makes your story a lot more memorable in the sense that, oh hey, remember that one story about the guy, he was white, he was middle-aged, he had brown hair, sort of a stubbling beard and some minor anti-personal character quirks. You know that story? Oh, you mean The Last of Us? No, the other one. The other one story about that kind of guy. Oh, you mean BioShock? No, you're thinking of somebody else. Jack Reacher? No. Probably The Martian. No, and it just keeps going on. And this, if you design your characters well, that will be a lot less of a problem, where you won't have to explain them like that. If I say, oh, hey, that one story about the kid with the lightning bolt cheeks? Oh, you're talking about Pokemon, or possibly the webcomic Kiwi Blitz in its later iterations, but I digress. Let's talk about how character design will convey information about characters. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is leitmotifs, which is something that's really cool, and it will give you a lot of insight into how a character works and how a character reacts, and a lot of the things that people have. So when I presented this earlier, we got a really good look at some of the characters that were represented by these leitmotifs, and I'll tell you the reactions that we got in class when these themes were played live. Pirate. sort of a defeated samurai. The class that I talked to said that, you know, he sounded a bit piratey. This is not the case. If you're the one who said that, you should be ashamed of yourself. No, please don't be ashamed of yourself. I'm very sorry that I said that. He's sort of a defeated samurai. And this is reference to the way that he looks, the way that he talks, and his theme. So next, we're gonna cut away that music because it's terrible. It's great music. And we're going to talk about this guy next, Mr. Godo. Oh, crap, I have accidentally... This keeps happening. Okay, let's give it a second. There we go. Back from hell to, inflict pain on the lawyer who took his girlfriend away from him, which is, all tragic and stuff. So that's a pretty good reflection on the character of his theme music. You might notice that the Ace Attorney series does this really well. With their leitmotifs, and it's something that I might touch upon later in a different video, but Ace Attorney has some of the best music. The music actually has a characteristic of its own. We're going to do one more piece of Ace Attorney music before I move on to one more piece of leitmotif in general, and then I'm going to talk about something else. So this is the theme of Clavier Gavin. Already we're picking up a lot of major, 5/6 with Clavier Gavin, as opposed to the earlier Ace Attorney music, which was all MIDIs. This was the first Ace Attorney game that was on the Nintendo DS naturally, and so it was allowed to use a lot more tones and a lot more things that made the music sound very different. And to demonstrate this, the prosecutor was a rock star, which is something you might pick up. His theme music is composed of guitars. It's got a very, kind of glam feel to it, which is something that he reflects in a lot of ways. He's always, speaking German and stuff. He's like, Achtung, baby! And so on and so forth. And the last theme we're going to listen to is from Chrono Trigger, which is a brilliant game that also has great music, which takes on a personality of its own, and it lends it a lot of character. So this is the theme of a character called Frog. Again, we're touching up on the MIDIs that we've heard so often before in these kind of stories where you have we're done with leitmotifs for the time being. I might touch upon them later because I'm always forgetting things that I'd like to say. I'm probably going to have like 14 edits in this video where I like cut in a voice of my different self and, you know, I'm like, oh, hey, I forgot to mention this. And right now, by the way, Future Spencer is a great opportunity to do that. But let's move on to something different now. Let's talk about actual character design. So earlier on in these slides, it conveys information about characters. Now we're done with leitmotifs. Let's talk about these silhouettes. So these are all silhouettes from a first-person shooter. Most of you watching this video will know what it is because you're watching this video on the internet. And if you're on the internet and you've somehow managed to find this video, you probably know what game this is from. But that means you can appreciate sort of the message better. You know, we see this guy over here, he's got sort of a wrench going on, a hard hat, and truthfully enough, my class was able to guess that he is an engineer. Over here, you know, this guy was a little bit more difficult. He had a t-shirt cannon and sort of a Stetson, so they figured he was some kind of cowboy that was working for a function. That one was less successful, I'll be honest, but they managed to guess that this guy was a soldier very easily. And in truth, that is what they all actually are. Team Fortress 2 did a really good job with their character designs and how it conveys information from these still images, one of which I'm pretty sure isn't even like made by the company Valve. They have managed to convey so much information about each of these individual characters. You know, Sniper, he's a professional, he knows what he's doing. Engineer, he's sort of casual and laid back. And Soldier is a soldier. And it really helps out in the game because when you see these silhouettes, you know, they're very distinct. You're not going to confuse a demoman for a soldier because they look nothing alike. You're not going to confuse a pyro for a heavy. You know, even if their posture might be a little bit similar, the body shapes are so distinct. In fact, if you look at the game's files, you can find that the Team Fortress 2 team actually went and made individual teeth graphics for every single character, and they're all very different and very unique, which is a little bit creepy when you're looking at just the raw files, but it also goes to show how much effort they put into characterizing these guys, which is partially why Team Fortress 2 was still a great game for a very long time before they ruined it with the horrible update. So this next, I'm going to talk about more information that's being conveyed. Everybody's familiar with Scooby-Doo. It's been around for like 60 years. I'm not going to pretend that we don't know anything about this, but let's talk about Shaggy's walk cycle and his run cycle. Over here, we have an example of how he walks. Basically, he like kicks his knees out in front of him, he bobs his head like a chicken. That's something that we're so used to. And then over here, we also have, you know, how he runs. He's got his neck all forward, he's got his arms all done like that. It's like so indicative of who he is, and it gives us so much information about Shaggy as a character that when we see him walk or run in other ways, it is like, who is that guy? You know, we're not used to that character yet because we have no idea who he is. And you know, it feels like unnatural kind of when you see Shaggy walk or run in other ways. So next up, I'm going to talk about how it makes a story memorable. And I'll be honest, I didn't spend that much time on these slides because I figured it should be very obvious, you know. This is a pretty good example of the Matsuno brothers from the show Osamatsu-san, or Osamatsu-kun. These fellas are basically them from the beginning. From the first show, Osamatsu-kun, which was sort of revolving around the world of the six brothers as opposed to the six brothers themselves. And when they progress, you sort of see the characterization that they come to. And at this point, they are all completely you know, you cannot tell them from each other, but in this one, they're all very distinguishable. You know, I can tell this one is Choromatsu, this one is Karamatsu, this one is Osamatsu, this one is Ichimatsu, this one is Jishimatsu, and this one is Todomatsu. And I promise you I did not rehearse that. I just know that off the top of my head from the minor differences that they all have. So that sort of tells a story in the way that these two pictures progress, kind of in a diptych sort of style. You can thank me for that later. Also, you know, this makes it memorable. You can see, oh, this is obviously Hannibal Lecter. This is that guy from the webcomic. This is a great robot. That's Master Chef. This is Uncle Man. These are the clickers from Last of Us. I don't know who this is. I just found a picture of an anime and I figured somebody would recognize it. But it is super. The way that each of these characters sort of looks is totally iconic. And it can tell a story. Character design can tell a story. I think I've touched on that in the Mr. Osamatsu slide. But the way that characters design and the way that they change over time will tell a story in its own way. So this is an example from Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, which is an amazing show. If you don't like anime, you probably should still watch it because the dub isn't half bad, and it is just amazing. This is the character from the very beginning of the show, and this is the same character at the very end. And there are like so many little changes. His clothes fit better. He's still got that same attitude, but in this corner over here, I've put a little shame picture because this is actually like a decent way of saying the way that he's progressed. His hair has gotten like lighter. He's a lot taller, and this becomes very obvious as you watch the show. It marks the way that he's changed. He's sort of matured both physically and emotionally, and basically the changes that are shown by his body are a really great way of measuring that as you progress. This is another great example in Lord of the Rings. They filthed up these characters really well, and it kind of gave you the thought that there is actually some kind of trauma going through these people. Here's Samwise Gamgee at the beginning, when he's just dropping some eaves and stuff. He's just a nobody minding his own business. And then here he is at the end, like a total badass. He's got like his light out, he's got the sword, he's trying to defend Frodo with all of his life. And, it's just amazing. And then these are two pictures of Elijah Wood. Anyway, another great example of how character design tells a story, coming from these three shows and also that movie. These two shows and also that movie. In Mad Max Fury Road, you see Immortan Joe, and you see like the environment that he's in, and there's just so much that you learn. He needs a respirator. He's like obviously a badass. He's covered himself in white. He is just like a total. You see so much of him when you see him exist. When you see Ryuko Matoi for the first time, you see the way that she stands. She's looking for trouble. She's got that guitar case in there. There's probably a sword in there because it's anime and there are friggin' swords all over the place. She's a delinquent. She's got that little red streak in her hair. That's probably murderous intent. And she's just out looking for trouble. When you see Asuka Langley for the first time in Neon Genesis Evangelion, also a great show. Everybody should watch it. You see the way that she presents herself in common life. And if you'll pay attention to these little red things in her hair, that is part of her uniform, which is something that is shown to like be super traumatic to characters that are not her. When all the other characters go through and they have to put on that uniform and get in the giant robots and fight aliens, it's like something that's super emotionally. It puts a huge toll on them as people, and Asuka just like wears that around because that's who she is, and you learn so much about her just like subconsciously because of the way that she looks. She's different, she's unique looking, and she has those things in her hair that represent a sort of trauma for all the other characters that she can somehow put up with. Also a great example, this guy from Ace Attorney. And how he progresses through the ages. We've got sort of his knockoff British cousin over here, and how he changes. He's obviously very proud of his hair. And then here's his brother, and his brother as king, which happens in a later game. I'm not going to spoil that for you. But you just sort of learn a lot by looking at Winston Payne and his reactions in general. Ace Attorney is also a great way. They have these characters that learn from each other. Ace Attorney has a lot of like motifs and stuff that go on with each other's characters, and one thing that they like to do is shared behaviors. So you can tell, oh, this character was obviously taught from this character over here, or something, because of the way that their behaviors are similar. Over here we see young Miles Edgeworth learning from his adopted father. You see their clothing is quite visually similar. You see over here, there's Phoenix Wright's ancestor who's copying his pose from this guy over here. and eventually we see Phoenix Wright himself copying his poses from his mentor. And they do this with families, they do this with other stuff. Phoenix Wright is just a great example of how these work as well. In the fourth game onwards, they introduce a mechanic where you can spot nervous tells in people, and that in itself is a great piece of design. Because basically when you're spotting the nervous tells, it tells a story about how that character sort of developed that tic. So in one case, there would be a character who rubs the back of her neck when she feels uncomfortable. In another case, there's another who, will rub her arm, and that's because those hold spots of particular convenience or story to them, and it's just important for them overall as characters. It shows a lot of development. And all right, I'm just gonna do that pit over again. In Phoenix Wright, there's from the fourth game onward, there's a really great mechanic where you spot nervous tells in specific characters. Basically, like when one of them is nervous or lying, they might touch the back of their neck. When they might touch their arm, or they might cough a little bit. And your character can perceive these, and you get a little bit of story or background about how they develop these tics, which gives a lot of insight into the character and their motivations and how they might see the world. I use character design a lot in my project. A lot of it I can't show because the sketches were lost, or I can't pull up the files, or just general things that happen when you get your bag stolen. But I did use it a lot. I mostly focused, most of the stuff that I can talk about is the non-physical things that they would do. For example, in the Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya, there was a character who had a motif where he would stick his face too close to other people in conversations. And at first it started off as a joke, and eventually, it became a lot more obvious when he was doing it. Like, oh, this is just the way that he behaves. It's not a joke that his face is too close. So I came up with stuff like that for my characters. For example, one character has a horrible sense of balance. He falls down all over the place. One character has almost no physical weight and just sort of flutters around. There's another one who finds almost every opportunity she can to sit down. There's a character with an eye patch, and sometimes his eye patch will switch sides. Just little things and jokes that most people wouldn't notice, like, oh, one character tends to start her facial expressions or motions from one side. Maybe she's like, she smiles off to the right, or she'll like always lead with her right, or she'll always throw rock and rock, paper, scissors. Just little things like that to, make it for people who are really paying attention, or people who are really noticing, they might be able to learn a little bit more about that character. And conclusions. I learned a lot about character design while I was working on this project. It's a shame that I don't really have anything to show for it, except for all of this knowledge. But if you are planning on doing a similar project in the future, please keep these things in mind, because it will make your project just as good as mine would have been, which is a really sort of mean thing to say, I guess, in retrospect, and I'm very sorry about that. Let's do that again. If you're planning on doing a similar project, or you want to design characters in the future, you really should keep these things in mind so that you know what you're doing, and it's very clear for everybody that you know what you're doing. It'll make your work look good, it'll make it professional, and it'll leave a lot of depth for people to interpret. And every great artist wants people to interpret their work. Thank you. And let's stop.